It is the top of the hour. You ready, Ben? Do you want to jump in and get started?
Sure, let's go.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. This is our second webinar in our organizational adulting webinar series. We're XPLANE. If you haven't heard of us before, if you kind of stumbled on this through another channel, we are a design consultancy. And we've been in this business for about 20 years, and we've grown up quite a bit since our early days of doing a lot of visual mapping and things you might have seen in Wired magazine. Our work now really sits at the cross section of design, culture, and strategy. What that means in a nutshell is we are the human side of change. We really go for that organizational clarity and momentum in anything that we do. The way we work is primarily through human-centric design, meaning we put the people at the center of the process and the outcomes and the design. We use a lot of visual thinking. Visual thinking is, for us, it's the Rosetta Stone. It's how we all understand much more clearly and deeply together what we're talking about. And then, of course, co-creation. We know from our years of experience that the best solutions are the ones that we build with you, not for you, and the ones that you feel like you've had some authorship, a lot of authorship over, so it works for you from the start. Once again, if you're just joining us, there's a lot of different ways that you can join in and participate today. We want this to be very interactive. We've got some polling that we're going to do a little bit as we go through this process. We want to make sure that we understand kind of your situation, so we're going to ask a few questions as we go. There's also the chat function where you can actually put your questions in the Q&A button or the chat and just let us know what you're thinking. Let us know the questions you have. If you click on the participant window, you can also just raise your hand, and that will let us know that you want to get our attention and you've got a comment to make. We'll try to pause periodically throughout this to make sure that you have the opportunity to offer your questions or comments as we go. So to kick things off, we'd like to just start with our very first question. We want to just test out using the tools, make sure you all have a chance to use them, know how they work. So the first question is, did you participate in the Divisive Behaviors Organizational Adulting webinar that was in December of 2018? Okay. It's working. Yay! So you're participating in the poll, which is great. So it looks like most of you didn't. For the 5 of you who actually did, thank you for coming back. We loved the conversation the first time around. We felt like we learned as much as we shared in that first go round. For those of you who are here for the first time, I'll back up a little bit and give you a little context around that first one very briefly and how we got to the point where we are right now. So I'm just going to do that real quick because we want to get to the meat of this conversation today. So here we go. Today, it's me, Holly Noto. I am the Director of Consulting at XPLANE, and I've been an explainer for 7 years. But joining me today is Ben Carmel. Ben's been a part of our consulting team for a very long time. I've had the pleasure of working with him on a number of projects. Ben's specialty is instructional design. He actually works in a really cool place. He's at this intersection of learning theory, professional development, creative personal exploration, as well as community engagement. So when we get a little bit deeper later on in this conversation, you'll understand why Ben is our first choice to talk about the topic of building connection and defeating that apathy and disengagement in the workplace. So welcome. Thank you, Ben, for working on this with us.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thank you.
So our goal today is that all of you leave here with 4 things. 1, you'll have a much deeper understanding of how apathy and disengagement are impacting people in the workplace. So whether you're coming to this conversation because you have a responsibility to engage people, or you feel disengaged and you want to actually build up much more of a personally gratifying experience at work, this is for you. We want you to understand how it's kind of getting to you. And this is a lot of information that we heard in our surveys. We also will share with you the common reasons people say they're checking out these days so that you have a better understanding of what's driving this. We've got some approaches to share with you. We want to help you re-engage and amp up your passion and commitment at work. And we also want to give you that in the form of a framework that will help you get started either to work with your team or work personally on that as well. So as we keep going, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, a lot of people ask me why organizational adulting. It's a funny phrase, and it's not one we think of as associated with work. And the pop culture reference to it, or at least the concept of it for us, is really appealing at XPLANE. You know, the idea of young people transitioning to their next stage of life felt very similar to one of the bigger struggles that we see today with our clients and in the overall corporate community. And what's happening is that we see a lot of our clients struggling to transition from the ways of working that worked maybe 5, 10, or 15 years ago to the ways of working that are needed now. We're at the sort of height of a digital transformation, new capabilities, new skill sets, a new younger workforce coming in with expectations of new ways and capabilities of working. And business hasn't caught up to that. And our belief is that we not only need to transform the business processes and the business tools, but we also need to change and transform business behaviors in order to make the most of all the capabilities that we have. So we started this process back in the fall where we reached out to our community. We actually polled people through our website and our different channels, and we asked them this question: what are the biggest barriers to adulting, to really working better in the workplace? And what you told us is that there are 7 major barriers to working better today. What we learned is the number 1 barrier was divisive behaviors. And what we meant by that was, you know, silos, organizational structures that just are not collaborative and not connected. Territorialism or political behaviors, and also just the overall sense of sort of infighting and people feeling threatened at work by what would be sort of a sense of maybe loss or protectivism. So we did a webinar on that. You can actually go to our website and watch and participate in that website, that webinar. It's a recording. We encourage you to go do that if that's something that you're experiencing now. We also offered a framework there. The second most prevalent behavior that was getting in the way was apathy, resistance to change, and a lack of engagement overall. People just starting to move away from feeling like they were at work for a reason. So that's what today is all about. We want to take some time to really dive into our survey results. We want to give Ben a chance to share the research and the experience that he has and the work that he's been doing by giving you some great advice and some tips. And then we'll share with you our framework on, you know, amping up that engagement and passion back at work. So Ben, are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay, take it away.
Thanks. So we're going to really talk about, again, as Holly set it up, kind of the sources of disengagement, and then we'll go into some of the things we can do about it, some of the mindsets we need to maybe change about the way we work and the processes we work. And then we are going to leave you with some concrete advice, first steps that you can take, and some other things to maybe be a longer tail with things you can do over the long term to really re-engage and find and reach, you know, employees who might be either apathetic or disenfranchised with what's going on or their position within the organization. So I don't know how many of you are actual managers of people or teammates, but it doesn't really matter. All of this should be relevant to you, because the main thing is where organizations are going, where our economy is going, is that it's all becoming more human. And I hope by the end of this time together, you'll start to understand what I mean by that if that doesn't resonate with you. But in short, you know, things like empathy and conversation and communication and networking, those are the things that really rise to the top of good cooperative behaviors that people need. But first, let's talk about what are the sources. So the first one is here on screen. You know, if someone who used to be a great person at work, was always engaged, was really involved, was a key decision maker or a key player on your team, and suddenly is feeling disengaged, it's quite possible there's something going on that's outside of your ability to influence. It's something personal going on, you know, in their family life, in their, you know, their kids' life, whatever that might be. There's personal things going on. And if that's the case, obviously, you're not going to be able to help that person directly to re-engage them. But it does provide you with the opportunity to really bring some of that human behavior forward and be empathetic, to pull someone aside and say, hey, what's going on? Is there anything you need? Do you need some time away? Is there a flexibility of schedule you might be able to take on that would help you through this period? Because that's the first thing. So I just wanted to recognize and acknowledge that sometimes it's personal factors. So beyond that, then let's really get into what's potentially going on in your teams and in your departments and in your organizations that might be sources of disengagement. And the first one is what I like to call crime and punishment. So in worst case scenarios, this might be someone has been disciplined or even potentially dismissed because of the way they spoke up out of turn, or the way they took autonomous actions that maybe weren't appreciated and they really faced discipline. That's the worst case scenario. More likely, it's some kind of reprimand or some kind of just general feeling of discouragement. Those comments aren't welcome here. Maybe you spoke up at a meeting and got a glance from your manager saying, no, we're not going there today, kind of attitude. So it's a real disincentive to speak out and let your voice be heard. So, sorry, did you want to jump in, Holly?
Yeah, no, I was just saying, for us at XPLANE, we often see the impact of the crime and punishment culture as losing really great talent. I did a bunch of interviews leading into the organizational adulting series, and a lot of people who fall into the age group of that 25 to 40-year-old age group have left jobs in a few number of years because they wanted to work better, they wanted to work smarter, and they were reprimanded for it. And so it's costing business a lot of money to hold on to some of the old structures, some of the hierarchies, some of the our way or the highway. It's really an expensive proposition when people try to hold on to those structures.
Yeah, I mean, and many organizations still carry the culture of, never surprise your boss, always inform everyone what you're going to do before you do it. But really, in a workplace where we prize innovation and creativity more than ever before, you want to allow your people to delight each other as team members and delight their managers with surprises in a good cooperative way, just as you want to delight your customers down at the end of the line of the organization. So this idea that allow people to be their authentic selves and reach for something autonomously that they see as an opportunity, within reason. Obviously, we're going to talk about ways to work transparently and inform each other. And then sorry, that's okay. We'll just move on. The last thing I wanted to mention was just this idea of gatekeepers, but I think you're probably all familiar with that sometimes these gatekeepers or custom agents prevent us from, you need permission from this person to talk to that person. That's really a problem, and it leads to very quick frustration. Okay, let's move on. Thanks, Holly. So another thing that's kind of a source of disengagement is a drive for efficiency. Efficiency is important. Efficiency has always been important in business. I mean, we're not dismissing it, but purposes change faster than processes. So probably if you have a really strong process culture where you have a process in place, that was a process developed 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we go to this person, go to that person, things go in a certain order, but the purposes of business changes so rapidly that the processes often don't keep up. And that is a real source of frustration for people. So they're working harder, they're working kind of butting heads against a process that doesn't really match the purpose-driven work that they're doing. And so it leads to a kind of reluctance to pivot to new business models, because people feel like, well, we have this process and we have to follow the process, and if we don't, then things are going to form into chaos. So it needs a different kind of mindset to approach that. And the big takeaways of that is insight is really better than production, and the ability to know is often greater than knowing. So you really want to tap people's potential moving forward than a process that seems outmoded.
So I'm going to do something that hopefully is a little bit artful. One of our participants actually asked us a great question. The question came from Jonathan, who says, from our previous slide, what qualifies as an over-reliance on metrics? And I'm going to jump on this, Ben, and then ask you to maybe add to that. Jonathan, for me, when we talk about an over-reliance on metrics, we're not saying that metrics are not important and you should not have them. We actually like metrics. But with human behavior, one of the things that we intend to do is we rely on things that you can quantify, as opposed to things that are more quality based, things that actually allow people to bring their best self to work. So I'll give you a great case study. We spent a lot of time working with UPS. As you may imagine, their primary modality of working is very logistical. Tons of details. There's a bottom line meeting every day in every center about what were our numbers, what were our times, how close did we hit our metrics. And that was actually driving great performance in those areas that were being measured that you could quantify. but they were seeing some things happening in the background, attrition rates, sort of not being able to keep up with their competition, not seeing the type of what they would call discretionary effort that they typically look for. And when they dug deeper below that, a lot of people, all the way down to drivers or people who were doing, work in the warehouses, were saying, look, I've got this relationship with our customers on the street. I've got these opportunities to feed information back. I've got these things that I know that nobody's asking me about. And so they weren't really opening themselves up to listening more to what everybody in the entire ecosystem was able to bring back to the company and bring their whole self. Really be able to say, hey, I've got some ideas, or hey, I'm seeing this pattern that's not something we measure. So metrics are great, but there's also the other side of that, which is the human behaviors that make work valuable, engaging, worthwhile, fulfilling. And that's the way that you really present and bring yourself in the door every day. Your way of talking to people, your way of making it so that people can participate, opening up those norms at work that make it easier for people to actually engage and not feel like they're just a number or they're just a data point on a spreadsheet.
I think that's really well said, Holly. And you think about people who you know, and I'm sure we all know people like this in places we work, who are fantastic connectors or have insights into like connecting dots between patterns and saying, oh, I see how this is related to that. That kind of insight, it's very difficult to measure in numbers. So we talk about data-driven organizations, and yes, data is critically important to good decision-making, but still humans have to drive decisions. Use data as a tool, as lots of data points of information that we take in. But if we're over relying on metrics, we kind of take the human out of it. And really, this is the time to put the human into the work that we're doing, because it's all about connections and conversations.
And one other thought, hold on to this. Later, we'll talk about the immeasurables, things that you can't necessarily measure quantifiably, but that make a difference in the overall experience for people, the engagement, the self-awareness. So hold on to that idea. We'll talk a little bit more about that later.
So another source of this feeling of apathy or disengagement, of course, is feeling like your work is a commodity. And the bottom line of this is, boy, I could be replaced tomorrow. They could bring someone else in the next day and it would really make no difference to anybody. There's nothing more dispiriting than feeling like that. Now, I'm not saying that, if there's dysfunction within an organization, everyone is walking around feeling like the commodity. But a lot of people do walk around feeling like no one really sees me and the value that I put into the work. My work is very head down, and no one sees the value that I'm creating or delivering or with the work that I'm doing. And that there's just, no one is appreciating me for what I do. That's very dispiriting. And so there's ways we're going to talk about to working a little bit more transparently, and also as managers and teammates, recognizing people for the good work that they do. Often people feel like also they're not allowed, or they just don't have opportunity to use some of the skills they might have been hired to do, or some of the other skills outside of their strict working profession that they could bring to the workplace if only someone would ask, or if only there was opportunity. And so you want to make people feel like, obviously, they're not interchangeable, they're not replaceable.
The one that we saw a lot in our survey in the fall was this commodity aspect. A lot of people were coming in saying, I've been in this job for a couple of years. I see no real career path to get out of this. My skills from either college or a previous job are not being used, and I'm offering them constantly. And that's a real miss. That's a real miss on the part of either the teams or the function or the leader to not find ways for people to contribute. And I do think this is something that we're pretty bold about when we talk about developing leadership and talent, is that it really is the job of the leader, the manager, the team to make room for those things to happen, to actually inquire and understand and get to know people's talents and skill sets at a deeper level.
Yeah, well said. And the last thing that really impacts disengagement or apathy is inability for people to see how their work affects the organizational vision and purpose as a whole, how it affects each other. So it's, if you don't provide for people the sight lines to say, who am I, by the work I'm doing, who am I helping upstream? Or when I pick up my piece of work, who has helped get it to the point that it is now, that I can look at the data if I'm a data analyst, or I can look at a design if I'm a designer, or read the documents and I'm editing it. Who wrote this and for what purpose? So people need to feel like they have a connection to what's come before me in my point in the working process and what's coming after me. So if they don't have that understanding of upstream and downstream, they're not unable then to kind of paint a picture of what are the goals that we're all contributing to? Do I feel like they align with the work that I'm doing? There's ripples that happen as people work. And if people need to feel that those ripples occur. And so it's really coming back to this idea of humanizing the work, making me understand I'm connected to other people, not just process, not just objects that I'm working on, not just documents that I push and pull, but really to each other and to my teammates and to the larger organization. So you need to have a clear alignment around what are the themes, what are the purposes on each week or quarter or year of the purpose of my team and the work that we're contributing to the greater whole. Because influence really does ripple across silos and across borders, right? That those kinds of things can move across what typically would be the barriers of our department or our team or our organization even.
This is the one characteristic that we see coming up across almost every behavior that is a problem, which is when there is no clear goal. We're not all pointing in the same direction. We don't all know what we're trying to achieve. It does create these other behaviors that really become problematic. So it's not just the apathy and disengagement, feeling lost and not directed. It's also driving a lot of the divisiveness. It creates a lot of behaviors that we're feeling territorial or we're feeling competitive within our own company because we don't have a shared or common goal. It creates a lack of transparency. It creates very vague communication and a lot of running around and rework. So we find this one shows up in almost every one of our behavior case studies as a really big problem. And without this clarity, it has a huge rippling effect. That's our last behavior, Ben. Let's take a quick poll. We want to know where you all are today. So let's see. I've got to launch poll number 2. There we go. Okay, so here's the question for all of you. We've got 2 questions in here. The first one is, of these sources of disengagement and apathy in the workplace, which one is impacting your workplace holistically? So think about everybody you work with. The second one is you personally. So which one is really getting to you and making you feel disengaged or apathetic about the work? So number 1 is about everyone you work with, and number 2 is just about you.
You may need to use the scroll bar a little bit to scroll down from one question to another, depending on your screen size that you're looking at today.
I am watching the numbers calculate. We've got about 40% of the people have voted so far. And it's interesting.
Voter turnout's very important.
Yeah, no, it's going backwards and forward. I wish I could show you this. I wish I could have it be live. I have to wait till you all vote to show you the end result, but it's interesting. It's kind of going back and forth in a couple of categories. It looks like you've slowed down. About half of you have voted. If you haven't voted and you want to, maybe you're on the phone, you do need to come into the web link on the video in order to vote and participate. So let's give it 10 seconds. Who else wants to vote? No more voting. Going once. Oh, one more person got in there. Good for you. Going twice. Raise your hand if you want me to slow down. I'm looking at the chat right now. All right. Okay, here we go. We're going to close this poll and we're going to post the results. The big winner for your whole workplace is definitely the one we would expect: disconnection from purpose and impact. It does hit you at a group level, doesn't it? It really makes it so that people in general feel like they can't collaborate towards a specific end. I'm interested though in the second question, the drive for efficiency and process. Ben, we've got a little bit of time. We're running kind of nice and quick here. If you have a comment that you'd like to make, here's my question. If you answered about the drive for efficiency and process, is there anybody who wants to kind of tell us what your situation is, give us a little color, give us some depth around what's happening at work, kind of what's driving your lack of engagement and apathy? Go ahead and put it in the chat or raise your hand. We'll open your mic and we'd love to hear from you.
I really would.
Okay, Lena, go ahead. What's going on?
So I
Lena, you
think, yeah, hi. So
Hi.
I think from our organization, a lot of it has to do with this huge growth. I mean, essentially, from whether it's a business perspective or just the number of people, we've just doubled the number of people. And as we
Wow.
just have, going from, I don't know, 20 to 100 people, right? Either within a year, there's just so much going on that when you're a small group, things can be discussed, things can be communicated. But as you get bigger, and then obviously as an organization, you have more and more expectations from the stakeholders, and so forth. It just gets things gets lost. And and I'm hearing from what has been shared today. I'm kind of thinking like, yeah, we're not communicating in a very purposeful way, kind of like to connect people to the greater goals instead of just trying to find ways to structure and organize them so we don't step on each other. And somewhat along the way that became the let's say the most important thing.
what do you think is going to happen as you grow bigger? Are there any bigger risks that you see coming down the road?
Yeah, I think if we don't make that change right now, I think
Mhm.
the definitely attrition, the frustration of people is just going to be there. I don't think we're going to bring out the best in people, and that's what we've always aspired to do. But it's hard. It's hard to do that when we have the main group of people, the core of the people who are trying now to manage a larger team. As you double, triple it all of a sudden. But it almost comes. It seems to me that we almost have to slow down very intentionally, very purposefully,
Yeah,
in order to bring everybody on the boat and to move on. So
Right.
I've seen exactly this kind of case in an organization that almost actually I worked with a while back that almost tripled in size in the over about 18 months. And it's disorienting to the people who are already there, and the people who come on very quickly feel like, oh, they're just throwing bodies at a problem, and maybe I was hired with a particular job description, but whatever I'm being asked to do now is really not related to what I thought I was being hired for. And it's
precisely.
not that they don't believe in the mission of the organization. It's not that they don't like the people they work with, any of those things. There's just this disorientation that happens. And really, I think there's, depending on the kind of company it is, and whether it's technology or manufacturing, or I don't know, but there's various ways to kind of allow people to kind of form their own groups, small units that make sense on a particular project, and work out some of these little small efficiencies and processes together with small groups. And then you do some trial and error, and you can find ways that you might be able to then transport those notions into a larger group of working together.
Thank
Ben,
you.
we've got a really great comment from Beth, who is putting a chat comment in. She says, I feel like our drive for efficiency is similar to what you were saying about UPS.
Mm-hmm.
Executives are all about minimizing the numbers of mouse clicks and are missing the judgment and the thoughtfulness needed to make decisions and do the job. Beth, you know what? We love hearing that, because one of the things that I think about when I hear that there's kind of two sides to this coin. There's, really needing leaders, managers, people who are in decision-making positions to really kind of hear, really listen more and understand what's going on around them. And that's challenging for them, because as I think Lena was saying, when you start to triple, quadruple in size, you don't feel like you have the time to really connect and really listen. But that doesn't mean that you can't. It means that you have to think about ways to create listening more holistically across the organization. So one of my first pointers from most organizations is, yes, you can't triple yourself, even though your organization tripled, but you can create patterns of listening with the people you engage with every day and encourage them to do the same. You need them to be a conduit back and forth with you. And you need listening to be the habit. You need that sense of connection that you were describing as not just being metrics driven or process driven, but awareness driven, really having a sense of what people can contribute and what they're experiencing, not just the bottom line numbers. Ben?
And really what you're talking about, Holly, I think that's right on, is being a guardian of culture, right? Don't, if you had a great culture before you grew in size, or even if then there was cultural issues, what you're talking about is really not enforcing, but demonstrating and modeling a kind of workplace culture that values conversation and connection between people and different parts of the organization. And that's not an easy thing to do, but I've seen it done really successfully. And I know you have as well, Holly.
Yeah, and if you're actually looking at the chat window, I encourage you to open it up because Javier and Beth are having a great conversation right now.
Good.
I'm following along and I'm loving it. Javier, I completely sympathize with this. Some things are cultural norms. You go from country to country, and there are certain kind of accepted traditions or ways of working. But I think we're now in such a global, connected community that it is incumbent upon all of us, no matter where we work or our country's traditions, to really find ways to engage better, to understand how people are feeling and what's going to motivate them. And I think there's no better motivator right now than this, what I would call class of people coming in. I like to call it, because this is a generation behind me, I'm an old lady, people from 25 to 40 who really have expectations of connection, of meaningfulness, of purpose at work. I really feel like you're the bigger hope for work in general, because you want these things. And I think that it's the next step in from wanting is really going out and getting it, you know. And I think we've got some stuff that we can share with you later on today about how you go out and get that connection, how you get that meaningfulness. And it's not just for those of you who are managers and leaders, it's for us as individual contributors as well. How do we go out and create those connections and get that work experience that we're looking for? Keep talking in the chat. I'm going to move
Yeah,
us.
please do.
Ben's got lots to share, but we'll keep reading the chat and trying to feed these back in with all of you.
And what you just said, Holly, is a great segue into, I forgot to close this, a great segue into what I want to talk about next, which is what's happening now. Why now is this so critically important? And I do believe, Holly, you're absolutely correct. Some of it is generational and the expectations of digital natives, if you would like that term or not. I have mixed feelings about it, but those folks. So if we can go on now, we're going to talk about how to re-engage and how to build a sense of belonging and to take away some of the apathy people are having. So this is the large picture framework that we're dealing with now. People still talk about, I hear it all the time, we're an information company, we live in an information age, our workers are information workers. And I, in fact, think we're now moving beyond that. We're moving into a work culture and really our economic culture where people don't stay at jobs. In the average statistic I saw recently was 4.3 years is the average time anyone stays in an organization or a particular job. People do jump industries and jump careers. And so we're moving kind of out of this information age where it was all about engagement and curiosity and creativity, which are all good things that carry over, into what Klaus Schwab, who's a German writer and captain of industry, if you want to call him that, he was one of the driving forces behind the World Economic Forum, really talks about this kind of the purpose age, where people are valued for the meaning and fulfillment they bring to their work, the purpose they derive out of it. And what that requires then is a real self-awareness. So this is, I don't think this is pop psychology kind of stuff. I think it's very important that people need to see and be seen in the workplace to really bring their authentic selves, to find that purpose and to take meaning from the work that they do, even though they might move from job to job 6, 7, 8 times throughout their adult working lives. That sense of I mean something, and when I walk in the door to a new job, I have something right away that I can contribute is very important, that sense of self-awareness and purpose.
Ben, one of the things I think about when I look at this chart is the work we do when we're really on site trying to do a cultural transformation project. Most of the companies we engage actually fall more heavily into the yellow column under industrial. They want to go into that information age of employee engagement, and they want to foster curiosity, creativity, and innovation. It's a big push right now where they're all trying to get to. But I think that kind of the fascinating thing I'm picking up on as a trend now is that we're still not quite there in the information age. A lot of the behaviors and norms aren't quite there. And that's really for the bigger incumbents. Some of these companies that have been around for 20, 30, hundreds of years, that's the hard leap that they're trying to make. On the flip side, we've had this really great experience with some of our collaborators on Org Adulting, Phil's Coffee, Morningstar Farms, Pinterest. We've learned from them that as startups, one of the things that they did when they started to really form their new company is they started on this right-hand column under purpose. It's been fascinating because they didn't just say, let's go make a great product. Let's go create a great web experience or like a buzzy kind of Pinterest experience. They said, what's the workplace we want? How do we create something that's meaningful, that's fulfilling for the employees? How do we make customers our purpose? How do we have a shared purpose and shared goals? And how do we use our self-awareness in order to continually grow and innovate as a company? So they started at purpose, which is this, you know, it's obviously a great advantage if you're a startup, but I think one of the bigger challenges, because most of us don't work at startups, we work at incumbents in larger, more, you know, established companies. The challenge is kind of creating that evolution from industrial to information to purpose. And that's where I think it takes a bit of patience and also effort for all of us. It's not just about the leadership team saying we're going to have a cultural transformation. It's about saying, how do we get from satisfaction to engagement and from engagement to meaning? Yep.
The good news is for meaning, self-awareness, purpose, these are human elements. They're not based in kind of manufacturing and process and product delivery, but it's really based in kind of the most human things we could bring to the workplace. And that's an opportunity, I think, for people to really shine in ways that they may not have been able to before.
So I've got a question from Kay, and Kay, I'm going to try to answer your question, but right now we want to do a quick poll. So our last poll for today is, where is your workplace now? And what we'd love to know is, just based on your experience, where do you mostly fall? So if you're kind of left and right of information, you might put yourself in the information category. But if you've got, you know, you've got craft and mastery, and you've got, you know, something like, you know, efficiency is more predominant, but you're working on employee engagement, you're probably still in the industrial area. So I'm just going to launch this poll real quick. Let us know, based on your experience, where your workplace is today on this spectrum from agrarian to industrial.
And while you're voting, Monica, I just saw your comment. We're going to get into some actionable things that you can do in just a moment. So hang in there. Thank you for your interest.
Okay, about 30 of you voting here. Give it another 10 seconds. Are you going to count it down? All right.
New Year's Eve.
Well, there's a timer on the poll for me, so I was just.
Is there? Okay, what do I know?
I can see that. All right, we're going to close this poll down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's share those results with all of you. That's amazing. I have to say, for those of you who put your company in the information zone, actually, that's not a bad place to be. It's actually really helpful. I think that most companies are trying to get into that purpose land. They're trying to get there. If you're willing to, though, I'm curious. There were 6 of you who said that you're in a purpose-based organization. I'd love to open your mic. Could you give us a little bit around how your company, you know, works, and give us some of the flavor of what it's like to work there, and what's, you know, what do you do? What are some of the norms that put you in that purpose column? So if you can go into the participant window and raise your hand if you're willing to tell us about your work environment, we'd love to hear from you. I know there were only 6 of you who chose purpose, but we'd love to hear kind of the things that make your environment work well today. Anybody want to volunteer to share that with us?
I saw a comment that just came in. I think it was from Monica again, saying she doesn't have a microphone, but she's in a 5-person startup. And so she's very much in this kind of purpose-driven organization, purpose-driven little business.
Okay. Oh, Monica, I'm so sorry we don't get to hear from you, but please feel free to add some color commentary for us. We'd love to know what you find the most useful or valuable about your work environment. Some of the things that people do, some of the behaviors, some of the habits or practices that are going on in your workplace, because you basically can offer advice to all of us about what works and what's meaningful to you. So feel free to add that in there. For those of you who are having, you know, experiences in the information and industrial area, would you like to comment? Would you like to tell us about what's working and what's not? Raise your hand. We'd love to hear from you. No, it's okay.
And even if folks don't feel like they want to open their mics and talk, that's fine. Keep putting things in the chat. We're going to have a recording of this chat. This will be made available afterwards, and we can just keep rolling, and hopefully, you know, this thing will get into some of the things you can do and to re-engage in some actionable items. So hopefully this will speak to all of you, no matter what stage you're in.
Well, I'm just going to open up Javier's mic right now.
Okay, great.
Javier's raised his hand. He seems like
Great.
if I can get my mouse to work, we're going to open up your mic. Javier, what did you want to share? Uh-oh. Boy, I'm having issues with my interface today, Javier. I apologize.
You hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, hello from Medellin. I'm in Colombia right now, and
Hi.
I'm highly excited about this seminar. I really love it. I have a, you know, in my case, we have gone from 5 people, just like Monica, and right now we have 65 people, and then you tend to have different areas of the company with who are on a different stage of the chart that you're showing. You know, like
Right.
if you talk to the commercial department, you know, a lot of them are on the purpose stage. But if you go to if you go to the warehouse and operational side of the company, you will find a lot of people still being agrarian or industrial, you know? So I would like to hear from you guys, you know, if it had something to do with how you lead your teams, and if the leader of every area tends to help to move this, and how can you put all the purposes together to get everybody on the same channel?
Oh, that's a great question. So a lot of the work I end up doing around purpose usually begins with a problem. You know, how are we going to, you know, come up with this thing that we're going to go work towards? Purpose for me generally is asking the question. So, you know, first, why does your business exist? What's your purpose in the business community? Like, what are you trying to achieve? So what are your goals as well? And what I find works the best is not somebody telling everyone else in the company what the purpose and the goals are, or the vision. It's rather coming up with it together. So one of the first things you can do, whether you're very senior and you're leading a business, or you're sort of in the middle, you're leading a function, or maybe you're leading a team, maybe you're kind of at different strata of an organization, regardless of where you sit, bringing people together to come up with a shared purpose is the first best step you can take. So, you know, I often have teams tell me, you know, we've come up with a purpose, and sometimes we feel like we're misaligned with the rest of the organization. That will happen. I'm not going to tell you it's going to be beautiful and easy from the start if you start where you are. What I am telling you is to start developing that muscle, build that strength in building together, developing together, and then start to grow, start to create that network of purpose. You know, if your team has a shared purpose and it's conflicting with another, work with that team. Start to create that network of purpose so that you can align better. And a lot of people say, you know, grassroots movements are the best way to actually start to change culture. We see that happen. It depends on the organization, but that is one way to get people to engage and get people to start to drive around purpose and building purpose together, one team at a time, connecting with the next team and the next team. I will say this, a lot of companies are very scared of wholesale culture change. And so when you say we need to build purpose, that might be a little bit easier for a whole company to think about, like, what is our purpose and what are our goals for this year? And then how do we, out of that top line goal, build our own goals and contribute to the bigger company goal? It doesn't actually take a lot of time. It just takes making the time and putting a process in place where you consistently do that, either quarter over quarter or year over year. And it's good business practice. It's good business discipline. And I think every business would benefit from doing that. Ben?
And I would say, sorry, go ahead. I didn't know. I
No,
didn't mean to cut you off, Holly. I was going to say, and the lucky thing is now those kinds of things are easier than ever to implement, which is you have, you know, ways of communicating, communication networks, you know, enterprise social networks, all these ways that people can be much more easily connected, seen, heard, and join the conversation from every corner of a larger organization than they used to be. It used to be the, you know, the folks that works out in the warehouse, you know, they were sort of out of sight, out of mind. Whereas now they can be just as connected as any other department within the organization, saying, hey, this is what we're seeing. Like Holly said with UPS, we are the front line of our customers who come in with their trucks and we load them up or whatever that is. They have insights that are really important, and I have a kind of new ability, and I'm about to talk about some of these things, to connect back to and join that conversation.
A couple of quick comments to keep in mind as we go, Ben. I'm going to give you 2 quick readouts. Jacqueline is saying she doesn't have a mic, but one thing that is helping her company move through the current information age towards purpose is a focus on creating self-awareness, which I know you can comment on later. She's saying that providing tools for employees that help them identify their personal core values and passion, and help and think about how they can bring that to work and how they can harness and appreciate the values of other colleagues. So Ben's got
Awesome.
some for you guys that's right in line with that. So thank you, Jacqueline, for bringing that up. And then there's one more comment I wanted to share for us to think about, because Ben, we can kind of incorporate this as we go. Kay is saying that humanizing outside vendors is an issue she's trying to manage. And what's difficult for her is that colleagues in various departments don't understand that there are other humans on the other side that have their own expectations along with the ones, along with meeting their expectations. So her colleagues they just want something done faster, but they don't really realize the impact it's having on the vendor. And she wants some tips on that. And I feel like we can get to that as well. Do you agree?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, it's about it's about not just connecting everyone within the organization, but we talk a lot about, companies talk a lot about humanizing and having empathy for the customers, but it's also the vendors and the suppliers and all the universe that you touch and work with it's critically important.
Fantastic. So we're going to move on, and we'll try to incorporate those that advice and that feedback for you as we go.
Okay. So I'm going to talk very briefly about what, kind of this re-engagement is not, and then give you some specific ideas and then some how-tos of what it means to belong, and then some actionable items you can begin with. So I'm going to go a little bit quickly because I just want to make sure we get this all in time. But I love those comments. I love this discussion. This is great. So first of all, I would say how to re-engage and build belonging. It's not rah-rah stuff. It's not beer on Fridays and ping pong tables. I love ping pong. I love beer. Like, there's nothing wrong with those things. And, if a company's got the budget and space and time to give people perks and treats, that's fantastic. But that's not solving the key problem of bringing the human kind of element into the workplace and engaging people. And I would say about team retreats are often useful. I would reframe them. Now's not the time to retreat. Now's the time to advance. Retreat implies you're pulling back and doing something, whereas really you want to advance into the future, advance into new processes and into the connections you build with each other. So I would say all the stuff's important, but it's not the solution. So what are some of the solutions? So the first one is really developing, as we've been talking about, this meaning through work. And some of you have already hit on it in your great comments. Purpose is relational, right? There's only purpose in relation to other people, other groups, other teams, other departments, and building value is really created through transactions. Let me say that again. So value is created through transactions. And so it's really about these conversations that we have that are so critical, and the ability to see each other, who's doing what, why are they doing it, how are they contributing, how can we get more out of each other? So part of that is sharing problems and discussions. Often, especially for managers, they feel like, I have these dilemmas or problems or big decisions I have to make. Include your people in making those. Ask for ideas. They have insights that you as a manager don't have, and you as anyone within the organization have insights in what you do that other people may not have. And so really sharing and discussing things are critically important. When you include people in decision-making, when you include people in question forming, you build in accountability. We're all in this together. I, the individual, am accountable to the communal effort here, and the community then is in a cooperative mode where they're accountable to each other, which is so critically important that you want to really build this accountability. So we talked about before, can people see how their efforts align with the purpose, align with the vision? So you need to really sometimes paint that picture for each other, or managers need to paint it for their teams, or C-level folks need to paint it for the people below them. How are we all pulling in the same direction? Because I'll tell you, it often feels like one department to another, and Holly and I have seen this time and time again, it does not feel. In fact, sometimes it's kind of an adversarial, I don't want to talk to that group. We don't give our information up to them, and I don't want to ask them for help. That kind of adversarial mentality is really a blocker and a really dispiriting thing. So scope your far horizons. Where are you going? What is the sense of possibility you have in front of you, and how does it affect the other folks around you? And then I talked a little bit about this in the last webinar that we did in December. So if you were there, then this will be a bit of a repeat. But I encourage you to have a space, whether it's a physical space, like a giant whiteboard in a conference room, or maybe it's a digital space where people feel empowered and free to speak their minds, a space that people can ask questions, even when they don't have the answers. You know, there's this mentality in business, don't come to me with a question unless you have a solution. I don't think that's necessarily valid. Solutions are great, but really good questions are also great. Machines can give us answers, only people can give us good questions. And so that question generation from your particular vantage point is critical to the whole organization. So people have to feel like they can give that idea or ideas or feedback or suggestions or whatever else it might be is really important.
I would say one thing to get excited about, if you're interested, just look up design thinking. One of the things that I love about design thinking for any business in any industry, any size, any level of maturity, is the idea of asking how might we, or why don't we, or what if we? And those are some really big things that I think business can use today, because there are operable parts of that phrase. How might we is asking, you know, what could we do differently? So it's future forward, and it's also collective. The we is important, but also the direction you're facing when you ask those questions matters. So I encourage you to get excited about design thinking and do a little reading on it, because it's a great sort of, it's packaged often as a process, but really it's a mindset. Working.
Yep. So really what we're talking about here is building a sense of belonging. Building a sense of, I belong to this community, we belong to each other, we have a sense of purpose. So here are some elements that help build, what does it mean to belong? And this gets a little theoretical, though I think it's all mostly very applicable as well. So one of those things is building that sense of possibility, not where do we come from and what our dysfunction is today, but what's possible in the future? What do we want to look like a year from now, or 3 years from now, or 5 years from now? Having that shared sense of possibility and the design thinking kind of element of building something and a vision to work towards is really important. The awareness of who's doing what, when are they doing it, and why is critical. If you're in a meeting and you don't know what this meeting is for, or you don't know why that guy over there is sitting there, what's his role? Everyone needs to take responsibility and say, let's all define what roles and stake we have in this effort that we're meeting about. And then I would say conversation is the mode of group transformation. So you need to have a good conversations, and that means everyone needs to have that sense of participation. And so these build on each other. If you have good conversation, everyone feels enabled to participate in the way that they choose. Some people are shy, some people are outgoing, but you need to allow space for everyone to participate. Then what happens is you are able to commit freely, right? No manager is coming to tell you, you have to do this. But if there's a new product development or a new initiative or a new whatever, you say, hey, Holly, do you think you could give 50% of your time in the next quarter to do this? And Holly will say, I'm really busy. I think I could definitely give 30% of my time. Great. She is now committed publicly to each other. Holly, we can count on her for this much time and attention. And that's really something she gives freely, and I might be able to give more, or I might be able to give less, but you need to commit freely and say what you're going to do to the group. And that leads to, voila, accountability, right? Then you will have that sense of accountability. And lastly, really what you're giving is gifts. And I don't mean gifts in physical things, so that's nice. Everyone likes candy and flowers, but you give the gift of your time, your intention, right? I intend to do X, Y, and Z, and maybe the skills or insights that you are holding back. If you're not sharing out, hey, I had an idea about X, you're withholding your gifts. That's why you're there. That's why you're being paid. It's not to, type X amount of words a minute. It's to have the gift of saying, I have an idea about this. I have insight. I think I know a way that we could do X, Y, and Z a little better. So really it's about the gifts are creative. Let me say that a different way. Gifts are a way that we create all these other things on this page, the sense of possibility, the conversation, the participation. It's giving of yourself, and people have to be willing to do that.
All right, so this is the question part of the time. I am happy to just open up your microphones. All
Sure.
you need to do is click on the participant window, and there's a raise your hand. Just raise your hand. I'll open up your mic. Feel free to ask us any question you'd like to ask. If you don't have a mic, feel free to use Q&A or the chat. I'll have both of those windows open, but we've got a couple of minutes here before we share the framework that we have for you to use. And we'd love, if you have questions, we'd love to be able to answer those now. If not, because I know we've been answering questions as we go, feel free to continue to raise your hand or post a question in the chat or post a question in the Q&A. I'll answer those. Ben, why don't you go ahead and start walking through the framework. This is a tool for everybody to use, something that hopefully, regardless of who you are, what you do, or where you sit in the organization, you can start practicing this today. Oh, actually, let's pause 1 second. Eric has raised his hand. Eric, go ahead. I've opened your mic.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
So I had posted a comment in the chat, and I figured I would just follow up to see what you guys think. So I think it really revolves around the sense of division between a culture that part of the culture wants to move forward and do things in a more progressive way, and part that is very resistant and wants to stay behind. And I guess it would be what are your experiences with how you make that progress? Because I know sometimes it feels like when you make progress with one group, you get blindsided by another one who isn't feeling that progress. And at times it can feel crippling where you make progress, but it doesn't actually feel like progress.
Yeah, I would say maybe Holly has an idea about this too. The first thing I would say to that, thank you for your question, is that power power is one thing given within a hierarchy. You know, I'm the manager, I'm the boss. Influence, however, can come from anywhere. So if you have a different way of working, or you and your little team of, or small department have a way that works for you, that you feel like other people could benefit from, or you'd like to model for other people, your ability to demonstrate transparently and influence others is really boundless. So, the small unit is always the driver of organizational change. Rarely does any change effort come from top down, right? They might have suggestions, or they might say, hey, little group over here, can you start doing this? But it's only when they start doing it, demonstrate, work transparently, and allow others to see what they're doing and how they're doing it and why, those people then can influence culture and organization in the way that I think is most useful in the long run. I think
I totally agree, Ben. I think that using what I would call an influence or network-based model is really important for people who want to see things change. They want to actually work better, work smarter, and they want to lead the charge by doing it. I love the idea of invention. I love the idea of experimentation. But I think with that, you've got to develop your skills around communicating and promoting that invention, that experimentation. Create some stickiness, start talking it up with other people. And that's where the network component really comes in, Eric. I think it's really important not just to experiment with your colleagues on, pick a situation, pick a project, pick a process, pick something that you do together. And if you want to work differently, try it. Propose it to them, get them to collaborate with you on how you're going to do it differently, to start building those new cultural norms or build those new behaviors. Then you've got to do things that really promote that with other people. You've got to invite them into your success, invite them to be part of it, and share what you're doing, ask for their ideas. I mean, this goes back to some of the listening that we talk a lot about, of saying, hey, we've been working on doing something different and better. We got some really good results, but we also got some problems we still have to fix. What do you think? How could you help? And I think creating that stickiness, creating that network and that community is one of the ways to grow those efforts. The feeling of adversarialness is one that you always have to combat with that invitation in. Invite them in. One of the things we do in our workshops and the work we do is we always say, bring in the biggest naysayer. Bring in who's pushing back the hardest, and get them to come in, invite their questions, invite their concerns, invite their pushback, and then start to play what if, play suppose we did, and have them help co-design that solution, because then they're more likely to do it.
Yep.
Okay, let's move on. Any more questions? We'll feel free to write those in the chat. We'll see if we don't have time at the end here today, we'll definitely answer those for anybody who wants to stick around for a few minutes longer.
So this is something that you can download from the site today and start working with. So you have on the left side, obviously, the what. What are the frameworks that build a sense of connectivity, that build a sense of community among groups of people. The how is how to do it. And the actions, that's for you to fill in. I mean, we have some ideas. If you want to follow up afterwards, we can get you started. But the idea is you can start very small. You could start some of these things today. They're sort of in order of little things you can do today to the biggest things down at the bottom, but there's no necessary order to do these. Any of these things you could start to do. So the first one is to connect. Again, work to purpose, purpose to vision, vision to connection. The key is to connect people to one another. This idea of upstream, downstream, you want to encourage people to build their networks within your organization, even with outside your organization, right? If people aren't talking, if they're not exposed to new ideas, to new influences, to diversity of opinions and people in the company, in their industry, around the world, that's where the ideas come together and the synthesis happens. So connect people to that vision of everything you do on a human level affects other people, or what other people are doing, it affects you, and that we're all connected. Visual thinking is a great tool for this, to draw pictures and start playing with things. Is this how we work? No, that doesn't look right. Move over here. So that's one thing. The second row is to accept people where they are now. You have to start having individual or small group conversations. And again, this is especially true for managers, but it's also for other people as well. Deal with the present and the future. Whatever disappointments, failures, wishes you had last week or last month or last year about someone, forget about it. The past is gone. Deal with the now, move forward, and allow people to give their hopes, their ideas, their actions they would like to take and will be able to commit to moving forward. Then the next one down, obviously, is have deep conversations, ask questions, and listen. I'm a big believer in silence. If you're a manager and you want to talk to everyone on your team one-on-one, first of all, choose the right time, choose the right place, probably not your desk in your office, but at some neutral place. Ask a question. Where would you like your career to go a year from now? And people say, oh, well, I'd like to, become a better project manager. Let 10 seconds, 15 seconds, just let that sink in. That silence will invite people to say, because I think if I were a better, okay, now we're getting to the heart of, she sees a problem, she sees how she might be able to fit her new skill set to a solution. Okay, that's where the gold is. So you really, that practice of asking good questions and really listening and allowing silence to fill in for, I want to ask you more questions, is really effective, I have found. Next one down is recognize the right things. These cooperative adulting behaviors, as we like to call them, you can't measure it. It's thoughtfulness, it's cooperativeness, it's helpfulness, it's the influence that people are creating through their actions and their behaviors. All of those things you need to recognize and reward in some way, even if it's just saying, great job. You did a great job in this meeting, really redirecting that conversation. Next is this idea that we just talked about of co-creating things. Get the troublemakers. Get the kid in the back of the class who thinks it's a he or she is all above it or below it or whatever. Those are the people to engage, have them co-create things. That's a great way to feel everyone is in this collective unit. And then you have that accountability that we talked about built in, which is the next line down. Ask people, what are you willing to commit to this? Hey, we have a new product coming and everyone needs to get up to speed and start marketing it if you're a marketing department. What are you willing to commit to that? Everything, great. 25% of my time, because I got a lot of other responsibilities, great. Ask people to give what they can. Usually they will overestimate what they're actually able to give than underestimate. That's a rare case when someone says, I can't do it. And then this last row, this is the biggest kind of lift, but it's actually some ways the most effective, is create the conditions for creativity, innovation, experimentation, not necessarily efficiency, though that could be part of it too. So prototyping, modeling, design thinking, fail quickly and fail multiple times before you arrive at the right solution. Invite your people and allow your people to have those kinds of experimental tasks as part of their job, because really that's what's going to push your organization forward. Because whatever you're doing today is not going to be what you need to be doing a year or 2 years or 5 years from now. The world's changing, work is changing, and people need to have innovation and experimentation as part of their working framework. Seems a lot of comments coming in, Holly.
Well, we're wrapping things up in the chat because we're past our time, but we're letting everybody know one, thank you so much for joining us and staying a few minutes late. I know you probably are at work today and you want to go do other things. Thank you. We really appreciate your time and obviously your participation. You're educating us as we share our ideas and our experiences with you. Erica, who is on our team and part of our connection and community outreach, is going to be posting the materials on our website, but they'll also come out to you via email following up. So if you registered, if you used your email address, those will be coming out to you as soon as they're packaged up and available. Again, as soon as we do another one of these webinars, we'll invite you to that so that you can attend. You can also let us know if there's something specific you'd like us to tell you about, if there's something more you'd like to dig deeper on, if you'd like us to jump into any other area of adulting behaviors or new ways of working, we'd be happy to conduct that conversation. So thank you for joining us, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much, everyone. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.